Welcome to the Talent Transformation Podcast. Today we are in Bonn, Germany, and we're here with Meredith Weller, the VP Group Talent Acquisition, Learning, and Growth at DHL Group. Meredith, so nice to have you here. Tell us a little bit about DHL Group first. Just give us an idea of what it's composed of and what type of people you hire.
So DHL Group is a 600,000 employee organization made up of 5 different divisions. We look after, obviously, Post for Germany, but also global supply chain, freight forwarding, freight and express logistics, as well as express overnight delivery. And we operate in every country in the world. So we're quite the big footprint. And headquartered here in Bonn.
Every country in the world. That's about 160
We say 220.
Right? Oh, I'm missing some.
Yeah, countries
Wow.
and territories, to be fair.
Okay.
Right? So we talk about, the Great Britain, but we say
Right.
4 different countries.
Okay. So that's a very, very big footprint.
Yeah.
Give us an idea in terms of scale, what that means for recruiting.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to recruiting, I mean, we are largely a frontline organization. So the majority of our roles are working in warehouses, delivering parcels, drivers, handlers and so forth. We recruit around between 150, 180,000 applicants a year or roles a year, positions a year. And some of those are temporary workers, some of them, are peak period workers. But I would say that talent acquisition is one of the big topics for us. I mean, we are a service industry. Our people are our brand. And it's critical that we get the right people who love our company.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And it's a tough challenge.
It is a tough challenge, without a doubt. I mean, especially when you think about the fact we're so globally dispersed, If you're in one country and with one focus area and you've got 180,000 people to recruit, that's a challenge. But when you spread that out across the globe, where in one country you might have just 2 people to recruit for the year and another you might have 50,000, the solutions are entirely different. The resources you need, the platforms you need, completely different.
So it's not just the nature of the market. It's really the entire scale that you have to operate in each country that can change really dramatically between country. But also, does it change sometimes where in one country you have to hire 20,000 people and the next year you really don't have to hire that many people?
It can happen. Yeah, for sure. And some of our activities are really based on customer demands. So we might open a logistics center, for example, for an organization that's growing or expanding into a market they haven't expanded into before. That may not exist for more than 2 to 5 years.
Right.
Or it may be that one has existed for a long time, but now has moved to a different location. You see a lot of movement around the globe, of course. So yes, indeed, it can change in a year how many people we recruit.
So the business is actually adjusting at all times to the economic environment.
Absolutely.
And what's growing, what's coming out of one country, what one country is buying and what another country is selling.
Yeah.
Because, of course, logistics, you're moving a lot of goods back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And you're a pretty integral part of the supply chain, the global supply chain. Has that been changing a lot over the last few years?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think when you think about the period leading up to COVID, of course, we always end up talking about COVID, don't we? But then throughout COVID, where we played such an integral role in ensuring that global trade still continued, and we had people who were really still working all through that phase out there delivering parcels and, ensuring that even things like vaccines got to where they needed to go. And I think, a lot of people moved to the e-commerce space where maybe they'd never tried it before. So there was a lot more demand for that sort of B2C experience. So the profiles we were recruiting changed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The markets in which we started sourcing talents changed. A lot of people, obviously, I think everyone's feeling this. We see the changes in talent markets at the moment, both in terms of the decision of certain groups to say, you know what, I don't want to be any more full-time in the workplace, or now that I've tried being an at-home parent, I think I like it and I want to stay there, you know, and if the economics works for them, then they recognize the value of that. So it's been a challenge for us to adapt not only to the jobs that we now have a demand for, but also to adapt who are we now attracting into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bigger focus on diversity these days, much bigger focus on diversity. So finding those individuals who can complement our workforce by making it a true representation of our global world, you know.
Well, I would imagine that you actually had a leg up on the diversity story because of your global footprint, right? Some of our customers are, you know, they have a very consistent employee base that is not that diverse. And when they went to other countries, they kind of brought with them the types of people that they had historically always hired. But you've gone into too many markets to have done that. Yeah. And you've gone into too many markets at a level where you can't do that, right? Yeah. So it's not an option for you when you go to, you know, developing countries to import your workforce.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I think it's an interesting challenge because on the one hand, we really care about the communities in which we operate. Mm-hmm. So localization is very important when you're working in any country in the world. It is critical, particularly in service industries, that you have that local relevance and representation, even at a very basic level of language. You know, you need to be able to speak the language. You also need to be able to reflect the culture, communicate beyond just words and more. However, to your point, local is not enough. You have to have this global sort of feel. So this blend of someone who might come in from, you know, obviously we're headquartered in Germany, so we often see a German or someone who's worked in Germany move to a country maybe to set up a particular product or service, that they are aware of what they're going into and that it's not, you know, that they're going to expect the same experience that they had previously, but they now have to work with people who are coming from a very different perspective, or, you know.
Yeah, on people issues especially.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah, it's too easy to be a judge of another culture if you don't understand what that's all about.
How do you balance that need to be local with the fact that you are, you know, you're a global company, you're a large company, you need standards, you need standard processes, you need consistent data for analytics. How do you strike the balance in talent acquisition, in talent in general? Because I should say, really, your role is, we should talk about that a bit, but your role isn't confined to talent acquisition. No. But in that area, you know, is it difficult to strike that balance? And have you changed the way you think about that over the last few years?
Yeah. I think, to the question, is it difficult? Yes. Is it worth the difficult challenge? Absolutely.
Okay,
I think if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and it would be, you know, not worth the effort. But we have definitely moved over the last 10 years to be much more this as central as necessary, as local as possible mindset. So we're a very decentralized organization. So I mentioned five divisions, but then each of those divisions, of course, has regions and then countries. And the perspective really is, if we can make the lives of the countries easier by providing them some core standards around things like, obviously, compliance, platform access, you know, data flow, integrations and so forth, but also education, information, sharing, like this best practice sharing and so forth. If we can facilitate an environment where those things that we do well in the center are really delivered well and rolled out well, and then the countries are able to, because they're educated and informed, they're able to pull on those and localize them as much as possible. So when you talk about, well, just because you mentioned I look after employer branding, onboarding, acquisition, talent acquisition, internal talent, offboarding and alumni, as well as next generation talent and our learning landscape.
You need to stop soon. But
I know, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But the reason that all that fits together is because when it comes together, then I look at things in a very cohesive fashion, right? So I say, if you take employer branding, I go, right, we have an incredibly strong commercial brand, right? Or consumer brand.
Right.
We also can leverage that to strengthen our employer brand. We have a global EVP, which is around things like we are a company that cares. We have a very strong purpose. We are a company that you can grow with because of our, everyone, when you've got 600,000 employees, you can have a cradle to grave experience, right?
Many different stages of your life.
Exactly. Now, if we're crisp and clear on what our employee value proposition is, and therefore our brand position, we can develop a global campaign that reflects our global brand and enable the local environments to consume and adapt to that, but still stay true to the brand attributes, right? Yeah. And we do that through tools and so forth. So we've got those tools. I then think along the chain. I go, okay, if you've got the brand in place and you've got then the ability to recruit well, the next thing is, how do you enable the recruiters and the line managers to have the best experience so that they can get the best in the markets in which they operate through a platform, the best platform that enables them, right?
Yeah.
We have the leverage of scale, super important, but also not every single country. If you've only got 120 people, one HR professional who's, very good at maybe industrial relations, but not so much experience recruiting, and by the way, doesn't need it because they're not recruiting. They need to be able to be handheld the whole way through. So they have the brand there, and then a very good system that supports them, the education that backs them up, the ability to reach out and get some, expert advice and so forth, and then leverage it all the way through to say, in case they have, a flood of applications, but they only needed one, we can feed the others into a talent pool that's then globally visible. So, we can really leverage that sort of, and I think that's critical, because if you do it as separate, individual, unique pieces of pie, everyone just gets confused.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because I remember talking to a senior manager once in a very large company. It was an American company. And I said to him, well, you're global. And he said, no, we're not. He said, we're international. And it was a very interesting distinction.
Yeah.
Because at that time, they did everything one way, and it was the way they did it in the U.S., and they had not yet become what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Which was fine. It's good to be aware.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is always a good place to start. And yet most people would have named that company as a very big, very global company.
Absolutely.
It's hard sometimes to adjust to local markets. And I think you're also talking about really the way you deliver the service to the business as sort of like the overriding theme in which this fits, right?
Yeah.
Because, some businesses need a lot of help. Some businesses don't need a lot of help. And sometimes they need a lot of help at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
Right? And it's hard to figure that out. It's hard to develop a strategy that's flexible enough to do those things.
Yeah.
So how does that inform the way you think of automation?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay. Yikes.
Yeah. So I think there's a sort of couple of foundation pieces that precede our discussions about automation, right? And I think the fact that we understood that one of the reasons we like big global platforms an integrated landscape, globally integrated landscape, is because when you have that sort of data consistency and the ability to have visibility on what's actually going on in the different countries, then you can use that sort of foundation to build automation that is sometimes for the 80%. So, we could probably pick, I'll grab a number, but I think if I took probably the top 15 countries for us, I might cover 75 to 80% of our employee population.
Right.
So big countries like the US, the UK, and so forth. So sometimes we make that decision and say, you know what, this automation is really only suitable for those audiences. And sometimes we say, you know what, this lever, this particular activity is so powerful for us as a global brand that, and I'm going to use something we haven't yet implemented, but we would love to implement, which is the automation of job advertisements, right? So really being able to click a button, get the best possible positioning for a role you're about to post,
right,
that is attractive to the market, that is relevant to the target audience, that is even things as straightforward as has no spelling mistakes.
Well,
it'd be nice. That should be able to be used by everyone. So that's,
right.
So when we talk about automation, the way we look at it is, what are the big ticket items that we must have and that maybe take a little more time and effort to implement, but are going to get a big bang for our buck?
Right.
And then what are the low-hanging fruits that we also must have? Maybe doesn't take as much effort and time to get them in place, but is something that will delight everyone. We have a lot of conversations, by the way, about sort of auto-generated translations.
Okay.
So it's one of the new, AI topics, right? But these, and it's always backwards and forwards. Oh no, in Germany, nobody likes that because it's a little word inaccurate and it's a little bit annoying, right? But there are some countries who are so used to it that having nothing
is a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So why not give them this sort of, translation topic?
Right.
But for us, just back to your automation question, automation is a huge opportunity for us. We are huge. The business case simply on automating certain steps of any of our processes, particularly in HR, always falls into the millions.
Right.
Simply because of, a couple of minutes saved on 180,000 jobs a year is a lot of money.
It's millions.
So,
right.
Yeah. So it's rather finding pragmatically how we move forward with it successfully. Yeah.
Well, so that's interesting because, it's that way you move forward, but there's so many things that can be automated.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend going back and forth with the teams sort of to picking? Are you happy with the sweet spots that you want to hit right now? Or are you happy with the ones you tried to hit 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know. To take either question.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not unhappy, put it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we may have missed opportunities here and there. I mean, we always think we missed opportunities, don't we? I would be a millionaire. Yeah. I think that when it comes to automation, it's sometimes a very attractive beast, a little bit like the shiny thing that we could automate that. Oh, gee, what if we automated that? That'd be amazing, Right. And to my point earlier about really talking about it end to end, I think automation is also one of those things that you have to look at beyond that thing I want to automate.
Yes.
If we're going to, something we've been successful in automating very recently has been the creation of identity in our organization. And this is great, It could have been a huge fail if we hadn't have looked at it from the context of, okay, that's great that we can create an email, we can create a profile of an individual like that. But if we don't look at that in the context of where do they come in, what language, what does their contractual setup look like, when do they get loaded into our core systems, what is their data used for after that, we could have automated something that
just did that one task.
Exactly.
And I think that's a difficult level of automation to consider beyond the immediate scope of the automation
Exactly.
and have it fit in with other automation to get a multiple effect.
And I think there's another aspect to that automation, and that is, I was around, this is not to show my age, but I definitely remember while I was at school when banks introduced ATMs, the auto teller.
I remember that.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
It was fabulous, right? These things.
Yeah.
You won't actually need branches anymore, will you? Because customers will just go to machines and do their banking until customers said, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to go into banks and speak to people. And I think automation has a little bit of that risk as well. I also worked in call centers, and similar IVRs were the greatest thing since sliced bread. You put the customer through a button number pressing activity, and in the end, the customer goes, I don't like it. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's the same with employees, managers, recruiters, whatever.
Yes, people don't want to be completely automated.
Correct.
Right. And
correct.
so that's interesting because your background. Give us a little bit about that and how you ended up where you are here, because I think it leads into this automation. thing.
So actually, I started my career in the days in Australia when call centres were brand new. In fact, I think I worked in one of the first call centres that ever existed in Australia. You had to be a graduate. You literally had to be a grad to work in a call centre. And it was fabulous. They were innovative and progressive and introducing CRMs and hardwiring the customer and all this sort of thing. And then, we go through the whole Y2K period, and, telephony becomes a big topic, and then, obviously internet and everything comes along.
Right.
At some point, I got very intrigued by the way human resources manifests in the call center environments. I was running call centers of about 300 people.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, how people find joy at work. And that's, so that was when I decided to make the move to HR, and people development is my primary focus, and acquisition.
And then you, of course, could pull a lot from your automation experience because call centers were very automated.
Exactly.
That was their essential competitive capability, actually, right? I mean, the one call center beat the other call center because it had more automation.
100%.
Yeah.
And my first experience with automation in HR was actually introducing a system to manage, I don't know if you're not old enough probably, but in the old days...
I'm old enough. You can't
in the old days,
get before me.
We used to have paper-based 9 boxes for talent reviews.
I started recruiting we had little, every headhunter had a little set of files of the numbers of the people they would call and the things that they had. And you just used a telephone. And I remember we were excited when they came out with the fax.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Okay.
So I was super innovative back then. In those days, I introduced, or I brought into my organization, a system which allowed the 9-box discussion that you had with managers to be entered directly into a system. Right. And then it collated the 9 boxes automatically. It was amazing,
Fantastic. Yeah.
But it did exactly what automation's meant to do. It saved days and days and days of work entering, manually entering information into Excel spreadsheets, and
which nobody needs to really do. Right. So you get involved in the human experience. Okay. There's a lot of talk now about candidate experience, and the industry has been very, very excited about that. We talk about it. We know it's important. But a lot of that experience has focused around the candidate going on the career site. Yeah. And we were talking earlier today a little bit in a meeting about what your view is of experience in general. And maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit here and share some of that.
Yeah. So I tend to position it in 2 ways. On the first side is we started talking about, this candidate as customer sort of mindset a few years ago, and driving giving the candidate the customer experience so that they want to buy what we have to offer when it comes to recruiting, which is really terrific. My positioning on that is, though, if we're treating candidate as customer, then obviously it makes sense we treat recruiter as salesperson. Now, I don't know about companies you've worked in, but in every company I've worked in, the salespeople are the rock stars of the organization.
True.
They get the best tech, the best training, the best...
They get the steak.
And the carrot. They get everything. Yeah. But the problem with, unfortunately, some recruiting teams is that they get the opposite of that. They get, just...
That can be true.
Do more with less, yeah.
Yes.
So that's one side of it. The other side of it, which what we were talking about previously, is candidate experience is very important. There's no doubt about it. But coming from my background, what I know about customers and their expectations is it's not that the customer wants every single thing to be flawless. In fact, it's kind of diminishing returns, right? You reach a point where, and I always use the example of time to wait on a phone. Is it wonderful for customers if the phone is picked up the second that they ring? Of course. But you know what? There's no difference in customer perception if it's picked up the first second the customer rings, or if it's picked up 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds later, right?
Right.
So you have to find that sweet spot of where have I actually achieved the point at which the customer or the candidate is delighted.
Right.
And not fall into the trap of trying to, offer the moon.
Right.
Rather, have a look at what about the recruiter and the recruiting manager? How can we delight them? How can we really make their lives easier? And you said, wouldn't it be lovely if recruiters could speak to managers 2 hours before they go ahead and start doing the recruiting activity, just so they understand what they want, what they need, what are the new skills.
Right.
Oh, they don't because they're too busy. Yeah,
right.
They're too busy because they're doing admin, trying to find slots in people's diaries to book appointments.
Exactly.
And, The other thing is I always have a dream that wouldn't it be beautiful if the recruiter could at the end of a placement go to the manager and say, here's the numbers behind what we did. We attracted 3,000 applicants. We interviewed 20. We, came down to the final 2, the skills the final 2 had. What part of it did you think was really valuable? What part didn't you? In my experience, this is what we could do differently next time.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Really advise the hiring managers, deliver a higher quality service to the hiring manager.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Now, ironically, that also could be achieved with a level of automation underneath if we had something that actually summarized and provided a report.
Right.
Generative AI could do that quite easily, right?
AI could. Yeah. AI is very good will be very good at predictive analytics.
Yeah.
And I think that, in big systems, and every system you use is by nature a big system because it has a lot of data in it. I think one of the opportunities for AI is to be good at putting together the kind of data that the user needs at the moment that the user needs it, right? And so that was my kind of like, well, when you go to talk to the hiring manager, you're developing an important relationship, which, by the way, the functioning capability of that relationship is going to feed back into candidate experience anyway. That's coming around to that, right? Because the feedback loop, the how far you take a person down a process before you say, well, you're not quite right for this, but and how capable you are at moving into some other process that might be actually a better outcome. All of these things require understanding what's going on in a big system, right?
And I get excited because I think in the early days of talent acquisition, the whole idea for recruiters were curious and creative. They were doing cool things, making different job ads. Like nothing was automated, nothing was transactional, nothing was process driven. It was all just figure it out and you'll find something.
Yeah.
And then, recruiting really became this kind of dry, transactional, follow a process. And I think what happened is that the joy in recruiting got lost somewhere. You know, this ability to come up with new, interesting ideas and have these conversations with recruiting managers and
and with candidates, because recruiters need to be. When I was a headhunter, I knew that I had to be in a good mood.
Yes,
you have to be in a good, and a salesperson knows that too. when you want to sell, you need to be in a good mood. Okay. And there are things that prevent you from being in a good mood. And they might not make you be in a bad mood, but if you sit there and you struggle with scheduling and you struggle with data entry and you do all of those types of things that, really don't lift your mood, then you suddenly are in critical conversations with other people about opportunity and the future and who they are and why they are what they are and what's so great about being in this place. And you're just not you're not conveying the feeling, right? It's hard for recruiters are not, they're not like the accounting team.
Yeah,
they do need to know the data and they do need to participate in processes.
Of course.
But they need to be able to elevate conversations beyond those things.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because they need to know the data, they need to be involved in processes, but that data and those processes should be automated to the point at which there is no useful reason to automate it, to free them up for those creative, curious conversations that they can have with stakeholders and so forth. Yeah. And that's recruiters. Imagine we also have a lot of HR business partners who recruit, and I feel really sorry for them because that's not their core activity, right? Yeah.
Right. And so you're trying to create a different experience for them as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the part-time recruiter is a very difficult job.
Tough job. Tough job. Yeah.
We deal with that a lot in retail too. In retail, you have a lot of store managers that have to do recruiting, and it's 8% of their job.
Yeah.
But can sometimes suck up 20% of their time.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it done, then everything else starts falling apart because you don't have people, right? So it's a tough challenge for them. In terms of dealing with hiring managers, recruiters, and candidates, let's slice it a different way now. Generationally, okay, people's behavior is changing. Okay, are you looking at that?
Yeah.
Are you thinking about that in across the globe?
Definitely. And in so many different ways. And it's early days. We're still sort of in the research or awareness phase right now, understanding, for example, the expectations that people have of the workplace. So there's a big topic around that. But also things like that are a bit more granular, like what is it that people do now when they apply for jobs? Like what does the 22 or I think you're 25-year-old, what do they do for when they apply for a job today? Are they really sitting down and writing an application letter? Are they really sitting down and writing out a CV with all their achievements and da-da-da-da-da? I heard a wonderful piece of information that really resonated with me the other day because I've got a 22-year-old daughter and 19-year-old son. And that is that this younger generation has more of a tendency to value the ability to apply skills than academic knowledge.
Okay.
Right? So there's a real nuance in that, right? So where we grew up and always wanted to have, doctor or whatever in front of it, there's academic.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure they still want that. But the point is that is not what's important to them at work. So they could go and do a doctorate in molecular biology and step into a role as a data analyst.
Because skills can be transferred from one role to the other, and now they're able to move around in roles.
Exactly.
Whereas in our generation, you knew your role based on what you studied in school.
If I studied molecular biology, I'm going to be a molecular biologist.
Right. Yeah. Well, I studied biophysics, and I never became a biophysicist.
Right, but I bet you thought you would.
You thought you would. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So to sort of wrap it up in a way, what are you kind of thinking about? What's like the big things that you're thinking about that you think you have to do over the next, 3 years?
Yes. Right. Easy. So next 3 years.
Easy.
Well,
good.
It's not easy to do. It's easy to say.
Okay. Easy to say. Okay.
I think the next 3 years, inside, so this is for us, nobody's going to care whether we do it or not, but it makes our lives easier, is really, really aligning our landscape from a tech perspective, but also a data perspective. So we've still got a little cleaning up to sort of harmonize all of that. Once that's harmonized, it opens up so many opportunities for us. Blending more the internal external market space, so really being able to pull into our environment who are the next best fit for our organization, both internally and externally. So understanding that. Driving this efficiency through automation and the use of AI as appropriate. So ensuring that recruiters are really freed up to do that value add work that brings them joy. And ensuring that we are positioned to deliver our strategy, which is our view on talent is when you've got 600,000 people, cradle to grave is a reality. As long as we can strengthen the opportunities for growth and make it very visible to people. So, building that sort of internal marketplace and complementing it with the external feeders, So I think, automation, harmonization, and this sort of visibility, transparency, access for people is probably. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of things, we've got young talent and blah, blah, blah.
Bringing joy to recruiters.
Bringing joy to recruiters.
A lovely idea for all of you out there who are recruiters. Meredith, thank you so much for joining me, for having me in here to your corporate headquarters. And it's been a pleasure.